Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about historical figures, specifically Lewis and Clark. So just to get your mind thinking, here is a question to spark interest. The current rate for land per acre in Georgia right now can be up to $4,000. In the 1800s, someone bought over 868,000 square miles of land for only 3 cents per acre. Who do you think it was? Follow the presentation to find out. If you're watching from home, here's a table of contents that can help you jump around easily if you're going back to refer. Our standard today is the student will be able to read about and describe the life of historical figures in American history. Specifically, identify the contributions made by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark with Sacagawea, and also describe how everyday life of these historical figures is similar to and different from everyday life in the present. And this is a first grade social studies standards. By the end of our lesson today, you should be able to answer these essential questions. Who was Lewis and Clark? What did Lewis and Clark accomplish? How did they make an impact on our lives? And how was life different for Lewis and Clark than it is for us now? So let's get started. Before we get going, I want you to use this KWL chart. So we'll start by giving you a chance to list things you already know about Lewis and Clark, or maybe about exploration, things that you want to learn, and then at the end you can go back and fill in those things that you did learn. Once you finish filling in those first two columns, you can go on. So what is a historical figure? A historical figure is someone that lived in the past, but what they did has had a significant impact on the way we live today. So first we're going to talk about the Louisiana Purchase, because that's very important in why Lewis and Clark went on this exploration. In 1804, Thomas Jefferson was the president at the time, and he bought all of that land you see on the map right here in green, and that was called the Louisiana Purchase. He bought this land from England, and it doubled the size of the United States. Now, he didn't know a lot about this land, so he hired Lewis and Clark to go on a journey to explore the land, explore the wildlife, but also to see if they could find a trail or a pathway to get to the Pacific Ocean. Right here you'll see a picture of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, and as we just mentioned, these are the two men that President Jefferson had hired to go explore this new land. And they also brought a big group of men with them, and they were called the Corps of Discovery. On this exploration, Lewis and Clark found many new species of plants, they found a lot of new animals, and they used a journal to record many of their findings. They would draw pictures, they would talk about food that they found and people that they met, and they formed many relationships with different Native American tribes. They also created maps, which were really important, so that when they came back to Thomas Jefferson, they were able to supply the maps that they had created, so the next person or the next group that went along this land would know where they're going and what to expect. During their discoveries, they met a very important person named Sacagawea, and she was important because Lewis and Clark were unable to communicate with many of the Native American tribes that they had met, so Sacagawea went with them and acted as their interpreter. So she was able to communicate, and they were able to make friendships, and they were able to trade things with the men and women that they met on this journey. You can see right here that Sacagawea is on this coin, and if you click and follow, it will take you to a website where you can further explore Sacagawea and her contributions to this journey. The Corps of Discovery was a group of men and women that traveled with Lewis and Clark, and they were picked based on some of the skills that they had that would be beneficial on this journey. There were 33 members, including Lewis and Clark, and one of them was even a dog, and his name was Seaman. So you'll see here on the pie chart that you can see the percentage of people on this trip who were captains, sergeants, privates, and there were some non-military. Here you see a timeline of Lewis and Clark and their expedition. So in 1803 at the beginning, that's when President Jefferson purchased the new land, and Following that, they were asked to go on the exploration. They met Native Americans. They had to deal with a very bitter winter and lots of illnesses along this expedition. And then here in 1806, you can see that the men and the Corps of Discovery returned home to St. Louis as heroes. So they spent over 2 years on this journey. So the explorers went on this exploration, and they were not able to pack enough food. They obviously did not take an airplane. They did not have cars or a trunk to pack in, so they had to go on horse and carriage as well as boats. So instead of trying to pack food that probably wouldn't last very long, the explorers had to rely on their hunting skills during this journey. And below on the graph, you will see the different types of food that they were eating and hunting. So a very little bit of beaver was consumed. There was some bear that was eaten, some bison, but mostly it looks like the explorers were eating some deer. Here is a little song about Lewis and Clark in their exploration. So I'm going to play just a short clip so you can hear it.
How did the USA get to be the size it is? On maps we see.
So those first lyrics were just saying, how did the USA get to be so big? How did it get to be the size it is you see on the maps today? And the song goes on and talks about the Louisiana Purchase and the contributions of Lewis and Clark. Here, and I'll let you guys do this on your own time at home, but you can click on some of these resources to watch a brain pop on Lewis and Clark. Scholastic provides some different activities, and then there's another website that has some games on Lewis and Clark and their expedition. Here, and this is one of my favorite activities, what do you think that Lewis and Clark took with them on their expedition? So keep in mind this is many, many years ago, and also keep in mind these men packed things that they need, not things that they want. So I want you to circle the items on the board that you think they brought and put an X over the items that you do not think they brought. So if you put an X over the TV, you are correct. They did not have technology, so that and the Game Boy would not have come with them. If you put an X over the milk and cookies, you're also correct. They were not able to bring things like that. This water canteen, they did pack things like that because water was one of the most necessary things they needed to have with them, as well as a pencil with a pencil sharpener or some sort of utensil for writing so they could record all the things they found, as well as fruits and vegetables. So here I provided a few activities for extension. So the first one talks about how Lewis and Clark did not have cars, so they brought many boats to travel. So if you are with a small group, you can create a boat big enough for 4 people using butcher paper. And think, how many would you need for all of the 33 people that were in the Corps of Discovery? And finally, what do you think are the 5 most important things Lewis and Clark should bring? And when you're finished coming up with those, survey your classmates and find out what they thought were the most important. And you could create a bar graph with the results that you find from surveying your classmates. And finally, you can turn and tell your partner one thing you learned about Lewis and Clark and return back to the KWL chart to fill in that last column of the things you learned about Lewis and Clark today. In addition to filling in those final columns in your KWL chart, if you refer back to our essential questions, you should be able to answer all of them. Who were Lewis and Clark? What did they accomplish? How did they make an impact on our lives? And how was life different for Lewis and Clark than it is for us now? And that final question might require you to think a little bit harder, but I know if you think about the time frame they were living in and the things we discussed they did travel with and did not travel with, you'll be able to come up with some great answers. Thanks!